Moving on, we have the minutes from the February 27th meeting. Does anybody have any comments on those minutes, or could we get a motion to approve them?
I'll move.
I can second. Item 3, not having any public comments, we'll carry on. Okay. Item 4, 4.1 staff update. I'll pass it to you, Drew.
Thank you, guys. So just giving an update on as I just presented to council on April 22nd, I think that was an update on the EV chargers on Bowen Island, the ones that were installed, or the only ones on Bowen Island at the moment, the 2 at the Bowen Island Library. So so the municipality had installed those in 2022. There's 2 of them there, and council they'd asked for a 1-year update, and I guess that was missed, but we're at 2 years now. So just saw that and came back to council with an update of how they're doing financially, so presented the report there with. So when the report was presented, they had projections of showing that they should be profitable and should be sustainable model and all that. So anyways, with that 2 years of actual data now, and then kind of updating the 5-year projections, we can see that they did lose money in the first year just from higher installation costs and that. But there was a big increase in the amount of usage, about 2.5 times more usage in the second year than the first, and ended up making a profit as of the second year, even considering the loss of the first year, over $1,000. And then it looks like in a 5-year time span, it looks like they would, the goal was that they would bring together about $5,000 within about a 10-year period at the very least. And that would because they're supposed to have a 10-year lifespan, so that would be the replacement costs. And so it's looking at the actual data, it looks like within about a 5-year period that would be achieved. So that's good. I guess a small update that Jillian Drake had just mentioned to me before that went to council, just had mentioned that there are going to be 2 included with the community center as well. So those are included in the plans and budget for the community center. And again, looking at a 2-car charger. That's about all for that. Now an update on the medical assured loading policy. Mainly passing this on from Doug. I just worked with them on this at the very beginning. So basically just give a quick timeline. So basically in September 2023, that's when council made the resolution for staff to draft a policy on assured ferry loading from Snug Cove. Then on January 22nd of this year, that's when staff presented the initial draft policy to the mayor and council. And then that's when council wanted staff to refer it to committees. So in February, staff brought it for discussion to the BIMTAC meeting, and I believe it also went to Accessibility Advisory Committee as well. And then on the meeting of March 25th, 2024, that's when council adopted the medical shared loading policy. So it's fully adopted at this point. And so just some of the changes that were made based on the feedback from both BIMTAC and the Accessibility Committee. So we made a distinction between you made it really clear up front that it was distinct process from the BC Ferries medical shared loading versus the Snug Cove medical shared loading program. We changed the definition of medical practitioner, so it was expanded to include nurse practitioners. Patient eligibility statement was clarified, so it's made more direct and focused that it was for people that where a ferry wait will cause a health concern. Healthcare professional eligibility statement was clarified, and the medical assured loading letter requirements were unified, so that a single letter could be used between both. It could be presented for the Snug Cove medical assured loading and for the BC's ferries medical assured loading. In other words, it can be presented at the going to from Snug Cove to Horseshoe Bay and vice versa from Horseshoe Bay and back. And finally, just mentioned that there are plans for improved signage and pavement markings at the actual loading space of the medical assured loading spot, and also that's a former template MAL letter with instructions will be provided to local doctors to simplify the process for doctors and patients. And so that's about it on that matter. What was this last one? Active transportation plan. So yeah, so I'd sent in, so after the discussions, so I shared around that package of about 25 pages that I was sending to ISL. So yeah, I sent it in, and I didn't quite know how to be received. So their response, so understandably, they responded and mentioned, they brought up like there's about 3 hours left on the budget that we have with them, and that's in going over the document, or over the document and over the points made, they felt like there was some very, very broad points, and then some specific points. There was also, in terms of some of the specifics, there were points directly contradicting each other throughout the document, just since we had differing views there on just a few topics. And what's the last thing? I'm forgetting. But anyways, basically they just basically explained that, yeah, with the limited budget and with some contradictions and clarifications needed there, they basically asked that we narrow down this 25-page summary of points down to about 1 page. So I'm doing that right now, and that's obviously that's really narrowing things down. So I think I do want to, there's always the risk of, again, there's differing viewpoints in there, and kind of got to go one way or the other there. So I think I will want to share this again with the group before sending it in, just because, yeah, that's a real edit job there, and pretty inevitable. Some views have to be kind of favored over others. So I'll try and do my best again to capture the most relevant points, or what was agreed upon the most, but still try to share that around. Anyways, I guess that's about the end of the update. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Drew. I think that's a ton of work.
I think so too. Okay. Next item is 4.2 Ferry Advisory Committee update, which is me. Yeah, so last meeting we talked about maybe having a little bit of a description of what the FAC is for. And that ended up being kind of timely, because BC Ferries has come out since and provided a new terms of reference and tried to define it themselves. But I'll start with a little bit of a summary from starting a couple of years ago. The FAC's role was very loosely defined, and there wasn't a real strong mandate, which led to most of the meetings covering everything from what vessels they should buy or not buy, and terminal reconstruction. And it was always a place where BC Ferries would listen, but not really a place where necessarily everything discussed would be acted upon. But there was also never any rejection of ideas. They would kind of take that in. They started trying to change their system, and part of that was to advise the FACs as to what level they were being consulted on. And they had some very specific language that I've since forgotten, some sort of IIAP standard for public consultation. And some of the basic buzzwords would be language such as inform or advise, and then there was one to the tune of consult. So this effort they started was to let you know as an FAC member whether what they were telling you or asking you to comment on was for your information or for your input, or somewhere in between. That also kicked off the terms of reference revision, in which they tried to define what the FACs were for. This had a input from FAC chairs a couple of 1 or 2 years ago, where they tried to all get together and give input on how to define what the FACs were for. And this conversation's been going on ever since, with quite a bit of push back and forth between FAC chairs from other islands feeling like their role is being diminished or not valued, and BC Ferries who's not really taken a strong stance either way for most points. Personally, throughout it all, my pet peeve has been BC Ferries' inability to just say no. It wastes a lot of time when we all bring all of these comments to them, and 90% of them are far outside the actual scope of consultation that is occurring. Most of like Bowen Island residents' complaints are with our service contract, which is comes from the province, how many sailings we get and what size vessel and those kind of things. So there was a lot of BC Ferries listening and not acting, but never saying no. So there was a threat of violence earlier, or I guess late last year, which shut down the FAC meetings. And they mentioned that in part the delay in restarting was not just to deal with a security issue or safety issue, but to try and get some of their plans in order. Because with some of this language about inform and advising, there was also a lot of promises for better action tracking and communication, and it was all kind of fizzling on the launch pad. There was a lot of great ideas, but I think they were overextended for the 4 or 5 people they have at BC Ferries that deal with all of this. So in the last couple of weeks, they've come back to restart, both with a better plan on security and what they think is a better plan for consultation. And they've come out with a new terms of reference that gives a mandate for the Ferry Advisory Committee. And while the terms of reference is 17 pages long, the mandate's fairly straightforward in that the Ferry Advisory Committee exists as part of BC Ferry's strategic goal to be customer and community centered. Committees serve in an advisory capacity to BC Ferries and do not have decision-making authority within the organization. Committees provide input for BC Ferries consideration on decisions related to changing schedules, improving terminal facilities, and solving route-specific challenges related to ferry service. Sorry, I missed that. It goes on a little bit to say that Ferry Advisory Committees support their communities by providing route-specific input and advocacy and supporting communications with BC Ferries by bringing forward opportunities, concerns, and ideas, in particular from key stakeholders and user groups, bringing forward community-generated ideas to help solve challenges, providing advice and insight to help inform decision-making, and advising on and assisting with effective ways for BC Ferries to communicate and engage with local communities, including connecting BC Ferries to established community networks and channels. So that's the new defined mandate, but with it comes a promise of some modified communication in that their action list that they previously started, but it kind of fizzled, is to be broken down into near term, future, and no plan to act categories. And BC Ferries is expressing that essentially items that have been discussed once and they don't plan on acting on will not be brought up, will not be admitted to agendas. And there's some strict rules about agendas being approved by BC Ferries beforehand. No additions to agendas in the last couple of days. So to me, when I receive all this, on one side, it seems really good in that they're kind of clearing up what BC Ferries Ferry Advisory Committees are and are not, and giving themselves tools to say no and prevent wasted time on conversations that aren't actually going to go anywhere. The downside is, and I may be reading between the lines a little bit, but it really does clarify how limited BC Ferries Ferry Advisory Committee's inputs are. And that's a bit more evident when you start talking about like how many of our conversations have come up before, and to say that they're not going to be talked about or considered in the future. That's really most of what Bowen Island residents complain about are persistent long-term problems, not just the state of the washroom and schedule adjustments. So that's kind of my summary on currently what the FAC is for and doing, but I'd happily answer any questions. Tim, you're muted.
Thanks, Tyler. I'm just wondering if you can send us a copy of the 11 pages.
Terms of the new terms of reference?
Yeah.
I think so. I better make sure, because one of my agreed to statements in the terms of reference is not to share anything that's not meant to be shared. So I think it's going to be public, or it is public, and I should be able to share it.
Okay, well, I don't want to get you in any trouble.
No, I expect it will be posted on the website if it's not already.
Okay.
The mandate is really the only really overarching page. Most of it's member responsibilities and codes of conduct.
I've got something last dated updated April 2024 BC Ferry Advisory Committee terms of reference on the website.
That's the one. Yep.
That'd be it. Okay, I'll put a link in chat and email.
Wow.
Double it up. In the chat.
Yeah, closed my agenda.
So what are you thinking, Tyler? Is it
Well, I guess this is
worth
first.
time and effort?
I mean, I've kind of been making comments about the FAC's voice not really being the voice to make some of the changes we need for a couple of years. So I kind of feel like my intuition was correct. I am reading between the lines slightly. You could read that mandate to be more encompassing than I do if you choose to shove as many items in each category as possible. But really, their procedure to start saying no, I think, will make it less of a waste of time, but its ability to enact change is very limited, which we've seen. It's never changed anything of significance in the past. It took 6 years to get a new hand dryer, so it's not going to be the avenue for getting a marshaling area or a change in service or them to consider passenger fit. Like, there's no major changes coming out of those conversations, is my take on it. There is a meeting coming up in which all of the current existing action items are to be discussed among the FAC chairs to come up with a network-wide priority. So I'm hesitant to go to that. It's 3 work days, which they'll give you a little bit of a stipend to attend, but I think I should, since I do have a history with this for a few years now. After which, I don't know how interested I'll be in continuing, but I'll probably stick it through this little period, and then see how it goes.
Can you think of any way that we can pivot or focus on a different part of BC Ferries? I mean, is the whole organization non-communicative?
Well, they're communicative. I think the problem is that they kind of have a true customer and a cargo, and the true customer is the province, and we are the cargo. And they don't really need to, or they can't change anything that we want them to change because their contract is to provide a very specific service, and that contract is with the province. And as we see with them receiving, what was it, $500 million last year or the year before, to help with some of their current issues, the province has a major contribution to this system. They also see our specific route as one that should be moving away from carbon intensive options. So the idea of bigger ferries and that sort of thing is not even really on the radar. So I think if I was to try and pitch for a priority, it would really just be for on-time performance or a way to communicate with customers when the ferry's actually going to leave, so that you can plan your day. So a surety of travel would be the buzzwords that they try and use. But the idea of any sort of reservation is so split, even within FAC members. I believe last time I brought up even the topic of discussing some sort of reservation system, members promise to fight tooth and nail to make sure that never happens. So it's not really something I'm going to spend too much time on exploring, because opinions are pretty set that a lot of people value flexibility of travel above all else, even if it means sitting in line for hours.
The person that we sent the letter to that was the new appointment for the one of their committees, is that a person that is worth trying to establish any kind of a relationship with?
Well, there's the two boards, and I always have to review their mandates to remember who does what. But I think it depends what you're trying to change. I think if you're trying to change how important Bowen is within the system, you're going to have a really hard time because on a passengers count basis, we're just minuscule.
Mhm.
And the big routes have severe problems too. So it's not like we are minuscule and disproportionately affected. Sunshine Coast gets a pretty bad backlog in the summer as well,
Yeah.
and a bigger passenger count. And they've been asking for a set two ferry service for all year for many, many years.
Mhm.
So just to be clear on Judy's question, was that William Dingwall that you were asking about, the BC Ferry Authority? We sent the letter to?
I think so. That was in the last minutes. We're going to send a letter to somebody saying, welcome aboard. Glad you were appointed, whatever.
It was in an email, I think. But yeah, that went out. It's the authority.
I'm just wondering if that has any power that, if we invited them over and took them to tea or something and, sort of tried to explain what our situation was and what our priorities were, if that would make any difference.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I've been exposed to a lot of the plights of other routes over the last couple of years, and a lot of our suffering pales in compared to some of the stories you get from other locations.
Okay.
And so in a system where there's limited funds, it's a public service, it's hard to stand up and make the case that I should be able to drive my vehicle onto whatever sailing I want all year while I live on an island. So, I mean, I try.
Or go
People,
green and get a passenger only or something.
yeah. And that's one I would keep pressing for is the treatment of the terminal, like the cutoff for ticket sales and buying your ticket out at the parking lot and having 10-minute cutoff to give you time to walk to the gate. Well, why not make it like the C bus where you pass a turnstile right as you walk onto the ferry? There's really there's not really a big argument against that. They even made that request for funding to modernize their ticketing service, which could potentially have been related to that, but I think they withdrew it in order to revise it potentially.
Hmm.
Any other questions? Happy to pass it over to Tim for our next item if we're ready.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to report out on a meeting that I set up with TransLink back on March 13th. I was working with Aaron Dems, who is the senior advisor for government relations. And I met him on a tour of the C bus last year. And I just asked him if we could maybe get together and talk about changes to our transit system here, and what the possibilities were. And we've been asking for consideration of on-demand service and an expanded service. And so he set up a meeting with Matt Craig, who's the senior planner operations, and Andrew and Liam came over with me, more like I went over with them, and we had a good meeting for an hour and a half or so. They couldn't promise much because they were waiting to get by what was happening with their funding and their budget for the rest of this year. But that's through now. So I have it on my to-do list here to give Aaron a call and see if we can set up the next meeting and see if we can get some movement and just try to get and maybe consider options like more smaller vehicles. I guess that as part of the on-demand system. But I just wanted to let everybody know that we're working on that. And if you have any ideas, let me know. And if we do get to the point where they're ready to talk about specifics, I'm wondering if maybe a subset of this committee should work with us and them.
I had a chat with Kate Coffey in terms of what was happening with the Bowen Transit, the bus that they had been running from town, and they still don't have the numbers to justify getting that program up and running again in terms of getting the bus on the other side to go downtown. It's just, until they've got a volume of people, even if it was just 3 days a week in the middle, they're not there yet. And they also have problems with respect to figuring out how to do the permanent link or semi-permanent link with the water taxi, because that was a big part of it. So it was relatively easy to get everybody downtown. It was much harder to get everybody back home. And she was saying that in terms of increasing coverage on Bowen, the biggest problem that they analyzed was the expense of getting the equipment, the buses. And has had conversations with somebody over the years and just been not ignored, but they haven't come up with any solutions. But she says that there's a parking lot someplace out in Richmond someplace that's just full of buses that, they've got a large inventory. And they apparently have lots of rolling stock that's available, and it's just a matter of trying to figure out, how to get it over here and how to get people in. She says it's relatively easy to find buses or drivers and to get people qualified. And the fellow that has the contract for Bowen I think she said it was a Quebec company. He's very happy and willing to increase the service. And, if we could get some ideas and get some help from TransLink in terms of just the rolling stock, then she thinks that we could probably pull something together relatively easily. So,
I think the other thing that would really help is if we could get some updated ridership numbers. And I was thinking maybe, Tyler, maybe we should just have a meeting with the actual drivers and ask them, what sort of numbers of people are moving when, and if they have any suggestions about maybe more smaller vehicles, or how they think the on-demand could work, because it worked quite well with the pilot back in 2019, and maybe getting lift stop running again, and maybe have an app so that you could actually connect with someone else who's on the ferry going to your neighborhood. So
an app that tells you where the bus is and whether or not it's, meeting the boat or keeping to the schedule around the streets.
yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
might be a segue into the rural transit fund.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of putting together a convincing argument to TransLink that we need more service is not being able to demonstrate that need, other than to try and get people out of cars with increased service. And my hope had always been through getting ridership numbers, we'd be able to demonstrate that peak travel was high because our averages are so low. Like if our monthly ridership is nowhere near a statistic that you would look at and say, oh yeah, you need another bus. But I imagine that's because it's probably Saturdays or the weekend seems to be a bit of a crunch in tourist season because we don't have full service. And then I haven't actually witnessed any commuter runs where I've been seeing people turned away from a bus. So yeah, that might run into challenges there, but the bus tracking, I think, was on our list of things to pursue for quite a while, and I can't remember the last status, but it wasn't happening at that time.
right.
Any other?
Well, that's something I can talk to Aaron about at our next meeting. Sure.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Can I just clarify with Tim? Can you say that person's name again and title, please?
So Matt Craig
Mhm.
is the senior planner for operations, and Aaron Dems, or Deems, Demes, is the senior advisor, government relations.
Of TransLink?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next we've got item 5 as new business, other business, but there's nothing there, right, Steph?
No, just this something about the playoffs.
Item 6 is information items, which just has the strategic plan, has excerpts from the council meetings, being the rural transit fund, which I think we've established as passed, and the member resignation.
No, there's two parts to the rural transit fund, and the design one is ongoing, and it has no limitation in terms of the application dates, and it's the rolling stock one that is ended, and I think that was end of February, I think was the deadline.
Right.
We've missed that one for sure, but we were nowhere ready for that. So, but you can apparently all year round you can put in up to $50,000 for planning and design. So that might be where we would, try and get some data and, maybe do, I don't know. I mean, I keep hearing from people that are out on Sunset that wishing that they could have a bus, and whenever I've stepped out of the house thinking I should just grab the bus instead of getting in my car, I don't have any idea when the bus is, so figuring out ways of advertising it and getting out, getting more people on it and getting the numbers up, maybe doing some planning and design around that. So, but
I'm just gonna show the letter for just to have for committee members to have a visual on it in the public.
the letter from Andrew
From
Weiler,
Patrick Weiler.
Patrick, yeah. So,
Okay, so it's this design piece that,
yeah,
okay.
if we were interested in that, what would be our recommendation? Who would work on that?
Well, that's something that we raised at our last meeting and didn't really get an answer to, because it's not clear to me if it would be TransLink that was applying for the funding or we would be applying. And if we did get the funding, would we hire a consultant? And I'm not sure that this warrants a consultant. But so what I'm thinking is maybe we can do it with the TransLink planners, and just my mission is sort of get them more familiar with our actual situation. And
then maybe if you're meeting with them, if you say, we've got, we're thinking of applying for this, and would they co-sponsor it with us? Is that of any interest?
Yeah.
Can they help us design it and, figure out what it is that would be best served? The cargo on Bowen.
That's kind of it did come up in the meeting when we were talking about it, and they didn't really have an answer. So I think we can try that again for sure.
Well, if not them co-sponsoring, then could they, if we did hire a consultant and we had, I don't know if we've got in-house staff that would be willing and able to work on it, then, would we have, if we did hire a consultant, then they'd have to be having access to the numbers that TransLink has, and some idea of whether or not TransLink would help in what ways, right? So even if they didn't do it, would they be interested in participating and supporting, right?
So how would how would you even engage a consultant right now, though? You need some sort of quandary or mission statement for them
Yeah.
to go by. Like, what is the goal? Is the goal to find out what the goal should be?
Find out what the numbers would be, yeah.
But the numbers is one thing. I don't think the numbers will tell us the story we want to hear. There's probably a more holistic question about how our service should even operate, because we have a couple of funny little quirks, being an island with a ferry that we treat as a sole destination. Like, all buses run to the ferry and they run from the ferry. Trying to get across Bowen by bus when you're not going to catch the ferry is actually quite cumbersome. And that's also part of, the scheduling issue, not knowing where the bus is because the bus runs per the ferry. And then how many people could you get out of cars if the bus actually provided travel on Bowen? Is there any reason to consider a different model? Because you could just have a bus that ran around Bowen all the time. The buses, at least the bus that parks by my house, spends a good chunk of time on each run just sitting there. But there's not enough demand in this area for it to keep going to another neighborhood, and not enough time left to do like a Mount Gardner run or something. But trying to figure out what we're asking for might be something that committee could work on, or we could at least define a little bit.
Yeah, my thought was that the TransLink, starts up new routes and does expansion work, and they're looking at expansion right now. They don't have enough funding to do everything they want, but they're working on it. And I think we just need to make ourselves present and show an interest in getting some planning done. And I think some kind of on-demand system with smaller vehicles could accomplish exactly what you're talking about. But they have, I think, some other on-demand systems, and they've got the results from the pilot. So yeah, I'm thinking if we work with their planners, and then if we need to get a consultant, we can get their direction on what we might need that for.
Yeah, I think you might need a concise explanation of a goal though, because I don't think we have the same metrics and goals that a normal system does. Like you often get more service because of population density or traffic or standard metropolitan transportation issues. But one of our biggest goals would be to reduce ferry traffic, like to have people choose to not take a car on their entire journey is a
Right.
major goal on Bowen Island, which doesn't fit because it's not measured by a full bus. Like if we had a full bus going to the ferry, that'd be fantastic. But if we can pull a few cars off of morning and afternoon ferries by having a more convenient alternative, like that has a huge value. Um, and we might need to frame that situation for other people to understand. I just worry if you go out with too blank of a request, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. But anyway, any other comments?
What happened to John?
So I guess if we've never seen the results of that on-demand project that they did
Yeah.
here, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we
you
have.
have.
There's a full
Yeah.
report. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I can send you a copy of that, Judy, if you want, or send it to everybody.
Yep. Pile it on.
Well, just say it was good. They wanted to do it again.
Yeah.
I used to look out my window and it's like over the sink and there'd just be a bus going by. I'm on Taylor. It's like, oh, it's so cool. There's like people going to Valhalla on a bus all the time. No, it's gone.
Yeah, that was one of the best used areas, apparently.
Oh, was it?
Steep hill.
So
Okay.
for the minutes then, I've got what are we gonna do? The committee is going to think about more specific framing to support Tim's verbal conversations. And then apply for funding. What are we getting out of this?
Yeah, we should definitely be trying to go another step with this the next time we talk.
Okay. So
How
we'll
we
just
take that goal, I'm not sure. Come to the table with a vision for a better Bowen transportation target. I don't.
next agenda, bring your vision.
Yeah.
Okay, I might go back to Kate and see what they've um pulled together in terms of information. And they were doing passenger surveys and things. See what
Okay.
she's got.
I,
That'll help.
I'd like to join you, Judy, if you meet with Kate. I've been wanting to meet with her.
Okay. I might have to share her brown scones though.
Okay, and I think we don't have any question period if there's no public.
Nope.
We have our next meeting penciled in for May 28th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And then I think we're ready to adjourn for the day.
Sounds
good.
All right, just in
Great,
time.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tyler.
everybody.
That was good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.